Hello everyone, so I will be doing my October wrap up. For the month of October, I only read 4 books. I wanted to read 6, but things happen. I am in the middle of my 5th one, Home Before Dark, and it is good, but I didn't get it done in time. The first book I read was Salem's Lot by Stephen King. I gave all the summaries in my October TBR, so I won't go into details on these about what it's about. But I gave this a 4 to 5 star ratings. I really enjoyed it. This is Stephen King's second book he wrote, published in 1975. The first book being Carrie, which I've read, but I want to reread because now I kind of want to just read all the Stephen King books in order. So the book starts off very slowly because if you know Stephen King's books, he can ramble sometimes and go into too much detail and things that aren't necessary. So we got to know Jerusalem's Lot, which is, they shorten it to Salem's Lot, but the town is Jerusalem's Lot. And you kind of get to know every single townsperson, even if they're not important. But I think Stephen King is really good at creating these small towns. He did that with Salem's Lot, then there's Derry and Castle Rock. And I really like that he incorporates these towns into other stories. So you get to really know the town and be how fucked up it really is. So I know Salem's Lot is brought up in other Stephen King's novels. These vampires are more reminiscent of Bram Stoker's Dracula than modern vampires. So if you like classic vampires, then this is a good book to read. The ending wasn't too bad. If you know Stephen King, his books are great, but the ending sucks because he can't write endings. But this one was okay. It was kind of anticlimactic, but better than other endings. The next book I read was The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. I gave this a 3.5 star rating. I did enjoy it. So this basically is about 4 Native American boys who are hunting in the woods and find an elk pack, but it's on the elders' reservation and not legally allowed to, or it's against traditions to go hunting in the elders' land, but they do anyway, and they kill all the elks, but this one was really hard to kill, but they end up killing it. And when they are gathering the pieces from the deer, they notice that it's pregnant, and so they bury the fetus and vow to use every part of the mom's body because you don't want to waste anything, and to honor that elk. But unfortunately they were caught and they were made to abandon everything. And now many years later, this elk spirit thing is out for revenge. I really like it because you get a small insight into the tribe's folklore and traditions. These Native American men are from the Blackfeet tribe, which is in northeast Montana, I believe. And so I really liked learning about seeing little bits of these tribe. And it just always amazes me how rich Native culture is. And I know respect is very important to them. That's why they have elders and they have these rules about hierarchy, but being more rooted in tradition and rooted in meaning for these hierarchy instead of here where you just vote. And I wish we had more of that. I wish that we learn from Native tribes, and I think it would have been so cool in school to learn what land we're on, who it belonged to before we stole it, and get to know their tribes and their rituals and stuff like that, because that would have been so interesting to know. We all know this country wasn't formed in a good way, and I don't think we should hide that fact. But sadly in school we were lied to and taught false information. And I think that's just way more disrespectful than just owning what our country was built on, because then we show that we're learning from it. But nope, we like to hide it and then kill their children and just steal more land and just be awful to them and act like they're the immigrants in their own country. Like, it's ridiculous. Anyway, sorry for that tangent. This book is very gory in some spots, and there's a lot of animal cruelty, dogs dying and stuff, so if that triggers you, do not read this book, or just kind of like prepare yourself for that. I was not prepared, and all of a sudden, because I listened to this on audiobook, also reading it, and so sadly I was listening to that part and it just like caught me off guard. So just be aware of that. I was slow at times, and so kind of was like dragging along, but overall I liked it. So I would recommend this, just for the uniqueness of it being about like native culture and stuff, because sadly I don't read many books like this. The next book I read was The Woods Are Always Watching by Stephanie Perkins. I was very disappointed in this book. I really enjoyed her other book. It was like reminiscence of a slasher film, and so I couldn't wait to read this book, and it sucked. I gave it like 2.5 star rating. It did have some good parts to it, like at some parts I was just like hooked, but overall it was just awful. I did not like the stereotypes of hillbillies living in like Appalachian. That part I really did not sit well with me. You see a lot in movies or TV shows that has that typical stereotype, so I could get past it. But then the ending was ridiculous. I'm not going to spoil it, but just know the ending is really ridiculous. The last book I read in the month of October was The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I gave this a 3.5 star rating. Overall, I did enjoy it. I am a big horror fan, especially like slasher films, and this was perfect for that, because each of like the final girl was kind of like based off of our final girls in slasher films. And then, so it's kind of like meta, because then they have their own versions of movies based on like their final girl experience. For example, one of the girls was a counselor at a camp, and a former cook came back and killed people, and he said that the reason was because the counselors weren't watching his son and he drowned. Then it turns out the son wasn't even real, so that's like reminiscence of Friday the 13th. And then one girl's boyfriend was killing people and dressed in like a ghost face costume, so which is Scream. So there's a lot of that, and I loved reading all their backstories and what made them the final girl. So if you're a big slasher fan, you'll love that part, because I really enjoy that. And I was disappointed in kind of the way that it went, because like if you have all these final girls characters, they have different stories and different, like, you know, the way they cope with the final, like how they did the trauma. But if you have all these like reminiscence of these epic final girls like Cindy Prescott and, you know, Laurie Strode, you kind of want them to be strong. And like that would be so cool as like a movie idea, or where like all the final girls in the movies got together. Like how awesome would that be? But it really didn't go that way. You didn't really get to know these characters. You just learned what happened to them and like the way that they cope with the trauma, because they all deal with it differently. One's like basically like a drug addict, and then another one just keeps to themselves, hides out like is a shut-in. But you didn't really know these characters, so it was just about their trauma, which I didn't really like, because I wanted like more like strong. We kind of know these characters from the movies, but even though they're like different people, if you're going to reminisce about them, like you're going to make people reminisce about these, you kind of want the characters to somewhat relate. not be these like unlikable characters, because they were very unlikable. So like it was good, but because I was expecting something else, I was very disappointed, and that's why it's not as good as I would have liked it to be. So those are all the books I read in the month of October. Like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Bye!